My name is Beth and I'm the sewing pattern designer and blogger at Sew DIY. Today is part 4 of the sew along for my new pattern, the Jodi wide leg knit pants. These pants were designed to be a more elevated athleisure style. So they're knit, they have an elastic waistband and are super comfy, but the wide leg gives it more of a sophisticated look. The pattern is available in sizes up to a 62-inch hip, and I will put a link down in the show notes. Last week I talked all about how to select your size and some common pattern adjustments, and today we're going to sew the pockets and the legs. So let's cut out our fabric and get started. Before we start sewing, let's do a quick overview of the pattern pieces and notions and tools that we need to sew these pants. Here I have my pattern all cut out, and I am using kind of a thicker medium weight loop back French terry, like classic sweatshirt style fabric. So pattern piece 1 is the back of the pattern piece. Right next we have pattern piece 2, and this is the front. This angle right here is for the opening of the pocket, and you'll see that everything lines up with the pocket pieces. Next we have 2 pieces for the pocket. This pocket piece is visible when the pants are finished, and the opening goes like this, so you'll see this little triangle at the top. The second piece is the pocket lining, and because my fabric is thick, I decided to use a thinner t-shirt fabric for the pocket lining. Last but not least, we have 2 waistband pieces. We have the front waistband and the back waistband. And these are connected with a notch at the side seam. And for my waistband, I am using a contrast rib fabric. And I'm using this rib because it's a little bit thinner and I'd like to have reduced bulk at the waistline. To sew these pants, I'm going to be using a combination of my conventional machine and my serger. On the conventional machine, I recommend using a walking foot, or if you have it built in, the dual feed system. I also recommend using a jersey or ballpoint needle to sew the knit fabric. This is a nice pack because it has different sizes, so it has 10, 12, and 14, so I can choose how thick of a needle I want depending on my fabric. Here are a few samples of stitches that I am using in this tutorial, and a thread that has a little more color to it. So I have a serger stitch, a zigzag stitch, and a lightning stitch. For these pants, I like to use the serger for finishing seams and the lightning stitch for most of the seams because I believe it's the most secure stitch. All of these are great because they all have stretch to the stitch, meaning they won't pop while you're wearing it. But when you open up the serger and the zigzag and you really put strain on that seam, you can see the stitches a little bit. And I think the lightning stitch is just more secure. You're less likely to see those stitches. The only drawback is that these stitches are really hard to remove. So if you need to test the fit, I recommend using a zigzag because it will be much easier to take that thread out. I recommend testing out stitches before you start sewing your garment, just to make sure that your needle is working, that the stitch length works, and to make sure you don't have any wavy edges. I was getting wavy edges with my serger and this thicker fabric, and so I raised the differential a little bit, and that helped keep this seam nice and flat. Let's start sewing. The first step in assembling the pockets on the pant front is to stitch the pocket lining to the pant front. So I have this pinned together at the angled edge for the pocket opening, and I have my walking foot on my machine, and I'm going to use a lightning stitch or stretch stitch for this step. And sometimes I will serge this edge, but because my main fabric is kind of thick, I decided that I want to grade this seam and just reduce the bulk here. So I have a guide here for my 3/8 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to stitch straight down. And here's the stitch. It's still stretchy, which we want for stretch fabric, but it's also very secure, and I think a little more secure than a zigzag or serger stitch. So I have one pocket done, and you can go ahead and repeat for the other side of the pants. So here's my pocket lining stitched to the front of the pant, and I have graded this seam, and that just means that I cut the seam allowance for the pocket lining a little bit shorter, and this will make sure that it's a smoother transition from the seam line to the edge of the seam allowance. Or for shorter words, that means less of a bump. Then I'm going to flip the pocket lining out so we see the right side, and I will press it flat. Next, I'll understitch right along this edge, and that'll help keep the pocket lining inside and invisible from the right side of the garment. To understitch the pocket lining, I'm going to use a zigzag stitch because I don't need something as secure as a lightning stitch. We're kind of just tacking this down and holding it in place. So I'm using a zigzag that is 2.5 wide by 3.0 long. Okay, and then you can press this to the back, and then next we're going to sew the pocket to this inner edge of the pocket lining, and I have my other side ready to sew. So let's bring that in here, and this is still loose from the pant, so we're not actually stitching the pant at this part. This is just the pocket and the pocket lining. All right, I'm going back to my lightning stitch just for extra security. It's not totally perfect, but it's okay. It's just on the inside. And I'm going to also serge this edge just for a cleaner finish. You also don't need to do the lightning stitch. You could just do a serged edge on this seam. Here I have my two front pant pattern pieces with the pockets almost assembled. On this left side, I have everything lined up, and I need to do the same on the right side. So we have stitched the lining to the front and then the pocket to the lining. And now we need to just fold it together and line up all of our notches. So on the back side, it looks something like this. When we flip it over, you're going to see the right side of the pocket, and that lining will be hidden. So I'm going to line up my notches, pin everything together, make sure it's all nice and smooth, and then I will baste through all of these layers just using a long zigzag stitch. All right, here I have my pant front, and I basted the pocket in place just using a long narrow zigzag stitch, and it's time to sew the front to the back. So here's my matching back pattern, and I'm going to start by stitching the out seam and just lining this up, matching the notches. I'm going to put a few pins in and then stitch all the way down. Next, we're going to stitch the out seam, and for this, I like to use a lightning stitch and then finish the raw edges with my serger. And I found that sometimes it can be a little challenging to get over this bump where the pocket is. So you might want to just slow down and lift your presser foot as needed to help it get over that hump. Okay, and then you can finish this seam however you want. If it's extra bulky, you might want to finish it separately. Or you just serge it or leave it raw if your fabric doesn't fray. I'm going to finish this side seam. I'm using my serger, and because this fabric is a little thick, I noticed that I was getting some waves in the fabric after I stitched, so I increased the differential or increased the number on the differential so it's a little higher than neutral. And that's something to just experiment with. Like if you're getting really wavy fabric after using the serger, try adjusting the differential, and that will change kind of how it's fed under the needles. All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish the hem because this will save me a little time later, and then I won't have to serge it in the round, so it's a little bit cleaner as well. All right, we've sewn the outer edge, and now we can sew the inseam of this pant leg. So you want to match each end and match the notch at the knee. And I'm just going to put a few pins in, and then I will stitch this whole thing with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And very often this back will be just a little bit longer from the knee to the crotch, and you'll just need to ease that in a little bit, and that's just a little bit of extra room for the thighs. Now I'm going to stitch this inseam just the same way that I did for the outseam with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and a lightning stitch. I'm going to finish this seam with my serger, and then we will sew this center front, center back seam, sewing the left and rights together. Okay, I've assembled my left and right legs, and now I'm going to sew them together at the crotch seam. So I have one right side out, one wrong side out, and I'm going to put the right side out one inside the other one so that we have right sides together. And then I'm going to pin these seams together, matching the notches. I generally like to nest the inseams to reduce bulk. Another option would be to press these seams open. Okay, and then in the front, we have one notch, and I marked it on the right side with a fabric marker, a wash away fabric marker. So I'm going to match that. Match the cut edges. In the back, there are 2 notches. We'll finish pinning it and then take it over to the sewing machine. Okay, again, I'm using a lightning stitch and a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to sew the crotch seam. Okay, now we just finished the seam and we're ready to attach the waistband. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Next week, we are going to be assembling and attaching the waistband and then having the pants, and that's it. It's really a pretty easy pattern, even for beginners. If you don't have your own copy yet, make sure to grab it. There's a link down in the show notes, and make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all my future videos. Happy sewing!